It's been 3 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the question of how Britain, and by extension Starmer, positions itself or himself in this crisis is a subject of much debate, of course. While Starmer reiterates Britain's ironclad support for Ukraine and prepares to meet Trump, he faces the unenviable diplomatic challenge how to maintain credibility and influence in a global landscape where European voices are drowned out by the larger strategic calculations of Washington and Moscow, and the desire to renew trade. To contextualize this, I want to draw on a comment made by BKUF6QR, who says, as intelligent as you project yourself, your biases are readily apparent. To suggest Brexit was a causal factor in Ukraine invading Ukraine is as ridiculous as it is an appalling fleet of fancy. Well, if Brexit hadn't happened and Europe were more united, I think it's highly likely that Putin would have paused before driving his tanks towards Kyiv. The facts: Russia does not have any respect for the UK or its military. The military is as weak now as it was before Brexit. Russia, like other enemies, respects strength, of which the UK is lacking. I agree entirely. The UK, on its own, as an individual power, is very weak and is just a voice. But it is a voice with some historical weight, and it is a voice with some significance in the UN. I go back to it. Pushing Brexit rhetoric at a time like this exposes your naked bias and lack of objectivity. I think not. Also, Europe collectively has been no better. Russia is entirely dismissive of the UK and Europe. Funny how everyone forgets about the Biden-Putin meeting before the war. Europe-Ukraine was cut out at that time also from direct negotiations, remember? Similar statements of the US is negotiating over our heads blather filled the air. Now the same dynamic is present, but, as always, Trump at the helm breeds intense seizure-like symptoms from certain quarters. Europe-UK are not respected by Russia. There's no seat at the table. That reality sat fine with Brussels and London. Even post-February 2022, there were only token statements about military readiness and investment, no action ultimately and expectedly. What you, the UK government, and Europe have in common is a lot of opinions and war stratagems. Behind the words is a hollow shell of commitment. This was best summed up by Sky yesterday when they exclaimed, "Where on earth will we get the money for defence?" The easy answer is from the British people. The harder answer is that priorities need modification. This was best summed up by a poll question yesterday. Do you support increased defence spending if public services are reduced? Such a question begs for rejection. The UK has a long love affair with bloated social spending. The truth is that the UK people don't mind spending more dollars on defence as long as it's not their dollars and there's no sacrifice that needs to be made. I should point out Britain doesn't use dollars, it uses pounds. Every human gravitates towards freebies. The truth is the UK supports Ukraine only to the extent that they must sacrifice. Also, if there is to be a sacrifice, other countries or country must do it, not the UK. If a small percentage of the righteous indignation could be turned into dollars, the country would be overflowing with riches. The last truth. What has been laid bare is that the left ideological agenda deplete with economic self-harm is at a crossroads. I don't understand that. I predict politicians will try and jam a square peg into a round hole. Don't understand that either. When that doesn't work, a true reconciliation will be had. Much of this is incomprehensible, but I think it adds some context, and the view that Starmer's posture of steadfast support is hollow rhetoric without tangible military or financial commitment is a claim underscored by UK's lack of readiness to make hard choices regarding defence spending, but I'm not sure it's entirely as clear as this commentator suggests. First of all, Starmer has emphasised the necessity of Europe stepping up in defence matters, but the UK is no longer in the EU, weakening its claim to be the bridge between Brussels and Washington. And meanwhile, European leaders like Macron are taking more assertive roles, crafting their own initiatives for a post-war European security structure. If Starmer wants Britain to lead, he must outline a distinct UK strategy rather than shadow European diplomacy. And the upcoming meeting between Starmer and Trump, therefore, in that is crucial. There is another option, actually. He could align absolutely with Macron, so effectively offering British support to Macron's proposal, or the other way round, the two acting in harmony rather than as one backing the other. But this harmony approach might be a way forward. Trump has openly questioned European resolve and has suggested that NATO allies should finance their own security. And Russia is not threatening America, it's threatening Europe. And Trump's reported land for peace negotiations with Russia, which exclude Ukraine and European leaders, are precisely the kind of behind-the-scenes dealing that fuels skepticism in Britain and the EU. And Starmer's commitment to ensuring Ukraine has a seat at the table is noble, but does Britain have the leverage to enforce such a demand? His government will likely need to rely on Macron and other European figures to form a united front, and Europe is disintegrating. You only have to look at Hungary. Returning to the domestic front, the debate over Britain's financial commitment to defence is an open wound. The criticism highlights public reluctance to finance military expansion at the expense of social spending, and polls reflect similar hesitation. The electorate supports Ukraine but resists financial sacrifice. For Starmer, framing defence spending as a necessity rather than a burden is crucial if he wants to build political consensus. The question, however, remains, will he risk political capital to push for increased military spending when Labour's voter base is far more focused on public services? Critics often accuse political figures of ideological bias when they don't like what they're saying, particularly in international affairs. And the provided this commentary from this individual. What's her name? BKUF6QR suggests that Western leaders, Starmer included, engage in showy diplomacy rather than genuine strategic thinking. To address this, Starmer must ensure that his government is not merely following the inertia of NATO rhetoric, but actively shaping policy and engaging with other nations, like, for example, Macron. If Macron and Starmer are talking, this is a positive. His engagement with Trump should not be an attempt to pacify or appease, but a moment to articulate British and European interests clearly. Moreover, he must reckon with the reality that a purely moral argument for Ukraine will not sway Washington or Moscow. Diplomacy, as history teaches us, is rarely about grandstanding. If Britain is to maintain relevance, it must be willing to make difficult choices, be it through bolstered military investment, strategic realignment with European partners, or even redefining its role within the transatlantic alliance. Keir Starmer, therefore, stands at a pivotal moment. If he's to emerge from Washington with tangible gains, he must bring more than rhetoric. He must bring strategy. Can Britain genuinely shape the global order, or is it merely a spectator waving a flag and not sure which flag to put up? If Starmer can navigate this crisis with precision, advocating for Ukraine, securing UK influence, strengthening ties with European allies, he may yet defy the critics and prove that Britain still has a voice worth listening to on the global stage. If he fails, then the charge of irrelevance, unfortunately, will stick and will be with us for the next few decades.